Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Talkin Treats. This is a podcast brought to you by the Treats team, where we explore people's passions. We discuss the struggles of having a passion with different guests from around the world in order to learn the best ways to really enjoy, learn, and ultimately grow from our passions. Today's guest is a singer-songwriter from South Africa. She's one of the best songwriters I have ever had the pleasure to meet, and I believe to be the perfect first guest to kick off Talkin Treats. She attends the Berklee College of Music, arguably the best music-focused university in the world, and has worked with incredible artists globally and having success in charts globally as well, leading her to actually perform in the Ultra Music Festival in South Africa. So, without further ado, let's talk to Jamie Fallon Smith.
Oh
Hello,
my
Jamie.
goodness, that introduction, that got me like a bit nervous. I'm like, who is this person? The
Don't get
best
nervous. Don't get
songwriter that you...
nervous.
Oh my God, no, that is crazy. I don't know if I can live up to that whole introduction, all those expectations. That's
No,
crazy.
no.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure.
It feels so
So,
weird to be on the other side of the interview because usually as you know, I have my podcast and I'm usually interviewing other people. So it's
yeah.
so weird now to be on the other end.
Have you been interviewed before?
Yeah, I've been interviewed before for like other things, but not for a podcast.
Well, I mean, this is not an interview. We're just chatting, right?
So you want to dive into what I've been up to recently?
Yes, please do dive in.
Okay. Well, basically, I'm actually working on my first debut EP, which is going to be a solo project. I'm obviously collaborating with some producers on that, but I feel like it's time. I've been writing nonstop for the past, I don't know how many years. And I think it's time for me to release some of these things. So I'm planning
Yeah.
on working on that. Um, Also collaborating with some other people that I've worked with in the past, hopefully doing some music videos. So I think there's a lot in the works that it's happening and just trying to keep busy. I just
Yeah.
graduated, so I have all this free time. I'm
Congratulations.
like, thank you so much. I'm like, oh, wait, what do I do now?
Have you found it like a good opportunity to write now more than ever, or has it just been a, circumstance of you graduating and years of songwriting where you said, okay, finally, let's just do this? Or was it, okay, now we're in lockdown, don't have anything better else to do, this is it?
I mean, so the thing is, when I started writing, any spare moment I had, whether it was in between work and classes, I had 10 minutes, I would find myself a piano and I would just write. Like, I always found it such a luxury to be able to have the time to sit down and write songs. And all of a sudden, when lockdown happened, I had all the time in the world. And I was like, okay, cool. So now I have this time to do that. So in the beginning, I was writing and writing and writing. And I started to find myself not really having much to write about anymore as much as I did in the past because nothing was really happening. Nothing was like inspiring me. And obviously, with the energy that was around at the time, I was kind of a little bit demotivated. But I had to really dig deep and be like, okay, what can I write songs about that maybe don't have anything to do with what's going on in my life? Why don't
Mm.
I write about concepts or feelings? And that's actually what led me to write this EP because it's a concept EP. It's more about a transition phase and like moving forward and moving into a new kind of power, which has the theme of 2020 and 2021. So I think it really helped me to dig a little deeper and explore different avenues of writing. And when I started writing a lot more, I started finding that all the inspirations that I listened to really merged together. Like they all came into these different songs. And I just, because I had so much time to listen to so many
Mm.
different genres, all of a sudden they were popping up in my songwriting. I think having all this time was a blessing, but at the same time, it was very challenging as a writer because you kind of a little bit understimulated a lot of the time. And
Right, because you're used to having to go out and about, meeting other artists, even just
yeah,
going to a concert can inspire you. So
exactly.
now you're just at home. I mean, you could watch a concert on YouTube, but it's not the
Which
same,
I
right?
do. No, it's not the same. I watch YouTube concerts all the time. I just look them up and I sit there and I pretend I'm at the concert or I'm on stage, and then straight afterwards I feel inspired to write a song. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Hmm.
wish I could go to a concert.
So at the beginning of it, were you kind of uninspired? I mean, from what you're telling me, it was just a struggle to put pen to paper, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I was dealing with the emotion of not being able to go back to Boston to study. I had to do school online and I stayed at home, and it was lovely actually to be here with my family and study as well. But everything was changing. All my plans that I had were flipped upside down. And I think I was kind of really grappling with the fact that I had no control over everything. Um, so I turned to music to release some of those emotions and to really like focus in on what it is that I do as a songwriter. And I kind of felt like what I want to do is help other people heal and grow and see truth in things and find the authenticity and the rawness of emotion. And I was like, what, Jamie? Like, what better time to dig into the emotion of like feeling
Yeah.
these like out of control and like use these feelings to write songs. So it was an exercise that I had to do every single day. And Jordan Rakei actually, he used to do challenges. So he used to post a beat on Instagram and then he'd be like, okay, songwriters, like write something over this. So I started reaching out. I was like, that's such a good idea. I started reaching out to producers and beat makers and being like, just give me beats. I just need to write. And I would just sit there and I'd write on beats and I'd mess around with harmonies and mess around with melodies and ideas. And I was like, this is the time for exploration. And that's kind of what I just did.
Is that your preferred like form of writing to get inspired by some maybe basic instrumental part that a producer might send you and then you write on top of that, or do you prefer kind of free flowing
From
on your end and then having somebody else produce?
To be honest, it's such a different experience, the two of them. I love them both. Obviously, I'm used to writing things from scratch. So, me coming up with the chords, the melody, the harmony, what instrument it's going to be on. Sometimes I even just write songs. I'll be walking down the street and I'll record it on my voice memos. Like, I'll just have songs playing in my head. I'm like, oh, that's a nice melody, and I'll record it. And oftentimes, the melodies that I'll figure out walking down the street are the ones I put on beats. So I'll get sent a beat and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there was a melody I was singing and I remember that, and I'll put that on a beat. I love getting sent tracks because other producers will think about harmonies or colors and tones that I maybe wouldn't think of if I was writing a song, and that inspires me. And I'll take everything that they're writing and kind of put it into my own way. And it's so nice because I'll take a beat and I'll feel what emotion comes from that beat, and I'll say, okay, how does that make me feel, and what do I want to portray? And a lot of the times, the producers will be like, that's exactly how I felt. I
Yeah.
just didn't know how to put it in words, you know.
It's
Um,
funny
so I
when,
like them.
no, I was just gonna say that it's funny when, you're in a creative space but limited, and that's something that I've also grown to love, where you can set yourself limitations. A good friend of ours that treats team, Julian, actually has a songwriting method where he forces himself to remove certain words from lyrics or to avoid saying
Mm.
certain themes within a song when he's writing something. And this whole thing where you receive a beat from a certain producer that already has this vibe, it already has kind of an atmosphere. It's already limiting you to a certain thing, and that might actually be even more helpful to be
Yeah,
creative because you're not you know open to all sorts of possibilities, and that can be true in music and painting or whatever it might be,
yeah.
dance as well. Do you find that that's better, or that you can take it your own direction because the world's your oyster and just say, okay, well, this is the direction, let's go with this, and then find the focus?
Yeah. It really depends on who's on the other end of the beat. So, like, if they trust me to go explore and do
Yeah.
what I do best, that's when I have the most fun because they're like, you know what, Jamie, I trust you. You do you. And then I'm like, cool, I'm gonna do this. And then I do that. But if there's someone that kind of has an idea of what they want and they direct me, I do feel a bit limited. But obviously, I want to deliver the best that I can to their taste. but I do prefer when people kind of give me the reins and say, go for it, go wild. And then we can, once I've like expanded on all my ideas, I always do a bunch of ideas. And then we say, okay, we like this from this idea, this from that idea, let's take this. And then we work together to bring that
Mm.
all together. Versus when I write my own songs, I don't know, it can get crazy. That's why I need co-writers because because I start modulating and changing keys and doing funny things and being like, oh, why don't I, instead of over here going from a major, go to a minor? I really just go crazy. And then I'll always need a co-writer to come in and be like, okay, this is amazing. Let's calm down and pull this
Yeah.
in and maybe take this away. And then they obviously help me out with
Mm.
that. But
You
yeah,
came
I
in
think it's
from
also good to set limitations, like those challenges, like saying not to use a certain theme. I think I would find that very difficult because I always speak about weather. If you listen to my song, there's always going to be something about like the sun and the moon and the stars or weather or rain or something. You always.
well, everyone has weather, so
Yeah.
it's global. It's global.
Yeah, for sure.
You came from the, something that you were saying now, where just start modulating, going from major to minor, whatever it might be. And that's, I guess, that comes from the fact that you started with jazz, right? And that was your
Yeah,
big musical origins.
for sure.
And the first thing that, when you were mentioning that, the first person that came to my mind was Jacob Collier, who,
Right.
genius.
Gee.
But he goes a bit too far. Let's be honest. Even for even for a musician, and even for artists who love music, it's exhausting to listen to his music.
It's colorful.
A-
Yeah, it's
And
very
it's, I
colorful.
mean, exhausting in the best way possible, right? Where you listen
Yeah.
to it and you've experienced it, you've gone through all these different changes. Um, do you find it that your impulse is to go crazy with all those kind of musical little tweaks that only maybe musicians might appreciate, um,
Um,
in respect to kind of pulling it back, making a bit more pop, or making a bit more simple, more standard, and perhaps in favor of making it more mainstream and therefore hopefully more popular.
Right. So yes and no. So the thing is, when I started writing music, now bear in mind, I only started properly focusing on songwriting when I got to college. So I used to write a little bit here or there, but I got to college and all of a sudden I realized where the money making was. And it was in the songwriting.
Yeah.
No, I've always loved songwriting, and I thought, okay, cool. Well, let me get into this. And when I started, I was like, let me make this as complex and complicated as possible. I want to make something that nobody's expecting. I want to be different. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, I had this revelation. People love simple. Like that's it. If people can sing your song, you got a banger. So I started just cutting down on the sevenths and the ninths and the sharp 11s, and I just started using triads, simple major minors. And I was like, okay, let me go back to the basics, and I started doing full pop. And then once I did that, I went back to my bluesy side, my jazz,
Mm.
and I add those in as little hints and little like reminders. Okay, like these are my roots and this is where I come from. So I would say now I definitely have a more controlled sense of something that everybody's going to enjoy. There's a little bit of soul, there's a little bit of R&B, there's a little bit of pop, or mostly pop actually, and there's a little bit of jazz. So I
Mm.
think I've found a very good balance right now, and the songs that I write, they definitely pay homage to the blues and rock and roll and jazz, but they're also something that people would enjoy nowadays for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
Dance music. I just want to make people dance, to be honest.
I prefer it as well, to be honest, because even if you're
Yeah,
sad, you can listen to dance music,
yeah.
and if you're happy, you listen to dance music.
Yeah,
So it
exactly. But
fits.
don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, I love a good ballad. Do I love a good ballad?
I was thinking, this whole conversation also applies really well to many other passions.
Yes.
The first thing that comes to mind is cooking, right? Where you have
Oh,
these
love it.
the crazy chefs that experiment with, I don't know, toothpaste flavored ice cream that's made from, whatever particular ingredient. I'm the worst cook you'll ever see, but I do appreciate eating and I love eating.
Yes. Oh,
Um,
I feel you.
But if you go crazy with these ingredients that are just so wild, and it's like, oh, how can I make a hamburger, mm,
Crazy.
taste like whatever,
Yeah.
gazpacho? Well,
No.
maybe you're going a bit too far. You have to bring it a bit more pop. You got to make it a bit more mainstream, and
Don't
just
mess with
kind of
something
add the
that's good.
flavors. Yeah.
Like, listen, I love cooking, and it's one of my it's one of my passions for sure. And I think you're right, it is the creative process. Um, I love adding flavors and improvising and doing my own thing, but there are times where I have to follow a recipe, and I was always known for not following recipes when I was younger, and a lot of the times it would flop. And then I started following recipes, and now that I know the rules, now I can maybe like add a little bit of spice and a little bit of flavor in my own way, but also keeping it to what everybody knows and loves.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's definitely music as well.
Yeah. Have you found it? Of course, the whole creative process is very different when you're working by yourself than when you're working with other people.
Yeah.
And now collaborating is basically through Zoom, like what we're doing now, or just through
Yeah.
text message where you say, okay, here's this guitar riff and enjoy, figure it out, and then you tell me in a couple of weeks when you've figured something out. Do you find that, I mean, because now you have a lot more opportunities, right? Because you can meet really quickly and just say, okay, well, hop on a Zoom call and we can figure it out. We don't have to be in
Yeah.
person, but it's
For
also
sure.
super limiting, right, for the process itself. There's something about being in the room with somebody. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you prefer this way of doing it because you can meet with more people, or is the physical?
So I I love the fact that I can collaborate with whoever I want. Um, right now I'm working on my EP. I'm working with one of the producer writers is in Boston, and then the other producers are in Cape Town. So we'll get on a Zoom and we'll have a writing session. But the recording process and actually being in the studio is something else, because something happens with people's energy when you're in a room together and you're just flowing and you're there in the zone and there's nothing distracting you and you're all just there in that room. Like, I feel like that's when the best things happen. And me and Betty, your sister, are busy writing a song, and we're doing it. Obviously, we can't be in the same place, but if we were in the same place, I know that we would just go crazy and creative and be like, oh, let's do this. And we would bounce off ideas with each other. We still are able to create a really beautiful outcome, but I don't think it's the same as when you're in the same room as someone else.
Hmm.
Um, I cannot wait to get back into the studio with people, because I I mean, as much as it's lovely to be able to connect with anybody in any part of the world, there's nothing like being face to face
Hmm.
with someone.
Yeah. Sharing the music later on, right? So once you've gone through the whole writing process, production, it's published, it's out there. And I mean, for example, you've worked with South African DJs like Kasango and Vanko, and these guys are club DJs.
Yeah.
These guys
Yeah,
live for the crowd. And right
literally.
now, releasing a song is kind of weird,
So
right?
true. So, um, when me and Kasango released One Night, the thing that made it so successful was that it was going around the world to clubs, to shows, to Ibiza, to parties. People were hearing it there in person, and people were like, "Let me get my Shazam." What is this
Yeah.
track? And now me and Vanko just released a song called You Got the Moves. And it's been doing really well. It's been doing brilliantly, but it's definitely, if he was able to go to clubs and we were able to go and perform, it would be skyrocketing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
dance music, you have to be there in person. It is about the party, it's about touring. So we actually thinking of collaborating until we can, and creating some music until we can actually go there out in person and give the people what they need. Because
Yeah.
when people are out there in the club or at a party and they hear a song, that's really when you feel it the most, like blaring through those speakers, and you feel that bass, and then it's just like hits you.
Yeah.
So I think it is very difficult for house music and dance and
I was so surprised with Dua Lipa when she released her album, basically
yeah,
at the start of quarantine. And that's a dance album. That's an album that
yeah,
you want people to dance to. And she decided to release it in the moment where everyone was at home. And it could have, I mean, it was obviously very successful. I think she just won the Grammy for the best album.
Yes.
So it obviously did well considering the circumstances. But
Yeah.
I was just thinking, if I was her, would I have held on to that just to
Good
wait until
question.
they open up the clubs and that's when I could really get the success?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I think she's big enough to be able to get people to listen to it. Like when she releases, it's going
Mhm,
to do well either way. I mean, you would hope. But that album, honestly, it was revolutionary for me. I remember in the beginning of quarantine, as you say, listening to that album, and it actually got me through a lot of the days. Like
mhm.
we were just taking it day by day, and that album, it got me on the treadmill, it got me working out, it got me dancing in the kitchen. It was like
Yeah.
a saving grace for me, and I think it helped a lot of people. You know, like as you say, like when you're sad, you listen to sad music, you listen to happy music. I don't think any of us wanted to listen to sad music during that time. I think we all needed something to
Yeah.
lift us up and to just really lift the mood. And I think that album really, really did that well.
Mm.
Such a good
She's so
album.
great. Yeah.
So great.
I really think she's amazing. And
Yeah.
she's, talking about before, mixing these kind of really complicated things with the simple things. She's mixing eras as well, where she's doing the super modern thing while bringing back some of the old stuff, and it's done so seamlessly where it seems like it's its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so
I really
good.
appreciate that. Hmm.
And it's like Miley Cyrus's new album as well. She's done the same thing with I
Yeah.
keep wanting to call it After Midnight, but it's not called After Midnight. Plastic Hearts.
Yeah, I
Not
was gonna
Plastic.
say broken or plastic hearts. Yeah.
Yeah, that album, my goodness
Yeah.
gracious. I think it did the same thing as well,
Hmm.
for sure.
So, I kind of want to finish off our talk with a little game. It's just a quick game.
Okay.
Um, we call it this or that. And some of these will make sense, probably more to you than to other people, but let's start off with a quick one. Because I know that you're kind of a multi-instrumentalist. Your main instrument is your voice.
Oy vey.
But
Yeah.
what would you prefer, or do you prefer writing on the guitar or on the piano?
I don't play guitar.
You
I
play the bass,
wish
right?
I played. No. So I write songs on the bass by
Yeah.
figuring it out by ear. I do not know how to play the bass, but yesterday I wrote a song on the bass because it's so cool. But like, I would never be able to get up and play the bass in front of anybody, but I do write on it. So I'm gonna say piano because I'd be able to
Okay.
perform live on piano.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
And then djembe or marimba? I think these are very
Djembe
underrated.
because hello,
Yeah.
where do I come from? South Africa. Represent.
These are two instruments that I think people don't know about, but they're used so often in
Yeah, so
modern pop
often.
songs.
Yeah.
And you just hear it. I mean, well, of course, Drake uses both of these instruments really often, but
Yeah.
all of a sudden you just hear like a little marimba in the background, a little djembe. You're like, oh, okay. You're getting some of
Yeah,
that
for sure.
influence there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tea or coffee?
As of recently, coffee, because I do have it every day. I used to be a tea girl. And then college made me turn over to coffee.
Yeah. Okay, and
Yeah.
this is a weird one. Very specific to you, I guess. And pardon me if I pronounce it wrong, but Coke Sisters or Milk Tarts?
Cook sisters.
How come?
Do you want me to explain what they are? So basically,
Yes, please do.
the South African delicacies. A cook sister is a piece of dough that is platted and deep fried and then soaked in syrup. It is the most delicious thing you'll ever eat. And then a milk tart, which is actually pronounced milk tart, is
Okay.
it's like it's got a pastry base, like a biscuit base, and then it's filled with a milky custard and cinnamon topping. It's delicious as well, but I think a cook sister definitely does it for me.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Right, Jamie, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you
Um,
so much, Carlos. That was so
hope you have,
fun.
yeah, I had a good time, and I hope, well, you have a nice rest of the evening.
Thank you so much. And thank you to
Yeah,
Treats for this
yeah,
treat. Yeah.
Treats. All right,
Cheerio.
Jamie.
Have a
Bye
good
bye.
evening. Bye.